The first time Nathan Hollister saw Delilah Armstrong trying to buy flour at the general store in Medicine Bow, Wyoming. He watched the shopkeeper's wife point impatiently at the handwritten price list, while Delilah's cheeks burned crimson in the afternoon light of 1882. She stood there in a faded calico dress, her dark honey-colored hair pulled back in a simple braid, holding out coins in her palm while Mrs. Henderson sighed dramatically and counted out the money herself, muttering just loud enough for the other customers to hear about how some people simply did not have the sense God gave a mule. Nathan had been leaning against the counter waiting for his order of saddle soap and ammunition when he noticed the way Delilah's fingers trembled slightly as she gathered her purchases, the way her green eyes stayed fixed on the floor, and the way she moved through the store like someone trying to take up as little space as possible. He was 26 years old and had spent the last 8 years working cattle drives from Texas to Montana, and he had learned to read people the way other men read newspapers. What he saw in Delilah Armstrong was not stupidity, but something else entirely, something that made him want to step between her and every harsh word that had ever been thrown her way. "Thank you," Delilah said quietly to Mrs. Henderson, her voice barely above a whisper. "You tell your father he needs to send someone who can read next time," Mrs. Henderson said, wrapping the flour in brown paper with sharp, efficient movements. "I do not have time to babysit grown women who cannot manage simple arithmetic." Nathan felt his jaw tighten. He paid for his goods quickly and followed Delilah out into the dusty street, where the September wind carried the scent of prairie grass and distant rain. She was loading her purchases into a small wagon hitched to an elderly gray mare when he approached, removing his hat in the gesture his mother had taught him before she died. "Excuse me, miss," he said. I could not help but notice Mrs. Henderson was being unkind in there. Delilah looked up at him with those remarkable green eyes, and for a moment she seemed to be weighing whether to run or stay. She was perhaps 22 or 23, he guessed, with a face that would have been called beautiful if she ever lifted her chin high enough for people to see it properly. "She is right," Delilah said simply. "I cannot read. I cannot do sums in my head like other folks. People say I am simple." "People say a lot of things," Nathan replied. "Most of it is not worth the breath it takes to speak." A ghost of a smile crossed her face before disappearing. "You are kind to say so, but you do not need to pretend. I know what I am." "And what is that?" She looked at him then with an expression he could not quite name. "Slow, dim-witted, my father's burden, take your pick, I have heard them all." Nathan studied her for a long moment, noticing the careful way she had tied down her packages, the neat stitching on her dress that spoke of patient, skilled hands, and the way she had positioned her wagon in the shade so the old mare would not suffer in the heat. "I have been working cattle for near about a decade," he said. "And I have met Harvard men who could not tell a sick cow from a healthy one, who would walk right into a rattlesnake den because they were too busy thinking about things that do not matter. Book learning is one kind of smart, but it is not the only kind." "That is a pretty thought," Delilah said, climbing up into her wagon seat, "but it does not change what I am." "Maybe you are not what you think you are," Nathan said. "Maybe you are exactly what you need to be." She looked down at him from the wagon seat, and something flickered in her eyes that might have been hope or might have been fear. Then she clicked her tongue at the mare and drove away, leaving Nathan standing in the street with his hat in his hands, watching her go and feeling like something important had just happened, though he could not have said exactly what. Over the next week, Nathan found himself thinking about Delilah Armstrong more than he should have. He was working at the Double Creek Ranch just outside Medicine Bow, breaking horses and mending fences, saving his pay to buy his own spread someday. The work was hard and honest, the kind that left a man too tired to think come nightfall, but still he found himself remembering the way she had looked at him, the quiet dignity in her voice when she admitted what others said about her. He asked around town carefully, not wanting to seem like he was prying. The Armstrong family had a small homestead about 5 miles north of Medicine Bow. Delilah lived there with her father, Thomas Armstrong, who had lost his wife to cholera 10 years back. People said Thomas was a hard man, disappointed in his only daughter, wishing she had been born different or maybe not born at all. They said Delilah had never been to school, that she could not learn letters no matter how many times her mother had tried to teach her before she died. They said she spent her days tending the garden, caring for the chickens and keeping house, and that she would likely live and die on that homestead without ever amounting to much of anything. Nathan thought about all the men he had known who could read every word in the Bible but could not read the sky before a storm, who could cipher numbers, but could not cipher whether another man was honest or planning to shoot them in the back. He thought about the way Delilah had known to park her wagon in the shade for her horse, and he wondered what other kinds of wisdom she carried that people were too foolish to see. The following Saturday, Nathan rode into town with the express purpose of being at the general store when he thought Delilah might be there. He told himself he was being foolish, that he should leave well enough alone, but his heart had its own ideas about what made sense. Sure enough, around mid-morning, he saw the small wagon with the gray mare pull up outside Henderson's general store. This time when Delilah entered, Nathan was already inside, pretending to examine a display of bridles. He watched as she approached the counter with a list someone had written for her, probably her father. Mr. Henderson was working today instead of his wife, and he took the list with barely a glance at Delilah. "Give me about 10 minutes to pull all this together," Mr. Henderson said, not unkindly. He was a fair man, if somewhat oblivious to his wife's cruelty. Delilah nodded and stepped aside to wait. Nathan saw his chance and moved closer, pretending to suddenly recognize her. "Miss Armstrong," he said, touching the brim of his hat. "We met last week, Nathan Hollister." She looked startled, then wary. "I remember." "I wonder if I might ask your advice on something," Nathan said, launching into the plan he had been forming all week. "I've been trying to doctor a horse with a bad leg, and nothing I do seems to help. My foreman says I should just shoot the animal and be done with it, but I hate to give up. You seem like someone who knows about caring for things." Delilah's eyes widened slightly. "You want my advice?" "If you are willing to give it." For a moment she just stared at him as if he had spoken in a foreign language. Then, slowly, she said, "What have you tried?" Nathan described the horse's symptoms, the swelling in the foreleg, the heat in the joint, the way the animal favored it when walking. As he spoke, he watched Delilah's face change. The uncertainty fell away, replaced by concentration and thought. "Is the horse still eating?" she asked. "Yes, appetite is good." "And the swelling, does it go down overnight and come back during the day, or does it stay constant?" "It goes down some at night," Nathan said, surprised by the specificity of her question. Delilah bit her lower lip, thinking. "It sounds like maybe strain rather than infection. If it were infection, the swelling would be constant and the horse would likely be off its feed. My mare went lame 2 years back with something similar. I made a poultice with comfrey and wrapped the leg, kept her in the stall for 2 weeks with no work. I also put witch hazel on it twice a day to bring down the inflammation. She healed up fine." Nathan felt a smile spread across his face. "That is exactly the kind of wisdom I needed, the kind that comes from watching and learning, not from reading it in some book." A faint blush colored her cheeks. Anyone who tends animals would know such things. "No," Nathan said firmly. Not anyone. You have to care enough to pay attention, to remember what works and what does not. That takes intelligence, Miss Armstrong. A different kind than book learning, maybe, but intelligence all the same. Before Delilah could respond, Mr. Henderson called out that her order was ready. She went to collect her packages, and Nathan followed, helping her carry the heavier items out to her wagon. "Thank you," she said as he loaded a 50-pound sack of feed into the wagon bed, "for your help, and for treating me like I have sense." "You do have sense," Nathan said. "More than most people I have met." He hesitated, then took a chance. "Miss Armstrong, would you allow me to call on you sometime? I would like to get to know you better." Her eyes went wide with shock. "Call on me? You mean court me?" "That is exactly what I mean." "But I cannot raid," she said, as if this explained everything. "I cannot do figures. I will never be any different than I am now." Nathan stepped closer, close enough to speak quietly so only she could hear. "I do not want you to be different. I want to know the person you are right now. The woman who knows how to heel a lame horse and how to show kindness to an old mare on a hot day. That is the woman I would like to court, if she will have me." Delilah looked at him for a long moment, her green eyes searching his face for deception or mockery. Whatever she saw there must have satisfied her, because she said, very softly, "My father will not like it. He thinks no man will ever want me." "Then your father is wrong," Nathan said. "May I come by tomorrow afternoon? I could bring my horse, the lame one, and you could show me how to make that poultice you mentioned." A real smile broke across her face then, transforming it entirely, and Nathan felt his heart do something complicated in his chest. "Yes," she said. "Yes, you may call on me." That night Nathan lay in his bunk at the ranch house, listening to the other men snore and thinking about green eyes and quiet wisdom. His bunkmate, a grizzled cowhand named Pete, had warned him that people would talk if he courted Delilah Armstrong. "That girl is not right in the head," Pete had said. "Everyone knows it." But Nathan had seen enough of the world to know that everyone was often wrong. He had seen men die because they followed bad orders from officers who looked good on paper, but could not lead a horse to water. He had seen women called hysterical for having opinions, children called lazy for learning differently, animals called vicious for being afraid. He had learned to trust his own judgment, and his judgment told him that Delilah Armstrong was special in ways that mattered. The next afternoon, Nathan rode out to the Armstrong homestead with his lame gelding on a lead rope. The property was small but well-maintained, with a neat vegetable garden, a chicken coop, and a barn that had seen better days but was still standing square. Delilah must have been watching for him, because she came out of the house before he had even dismounted. She wore a different dress today, still simple but a prettier shade of blue that brought out the color of her eyes. Her hair was braided and pinned up, and she looked nervous but pleased. "You came," she said. "I said I would," Nathan replied. "I am a man of my word." A man appeared in the doorway behind Delilah, tall and thin with iron-gray hair and a face that looked like it had forgotten how to smile. "Who is this?" Thomas Armstrong demanded. "Father, this is Mr. Hollister from the Double Creek Ranch," Delilah said quickly. "He has come to ask my advice about a lame horse." Thomas looked Nathan up and down with undisguised suspicion. Since when does Delilah know anything about horses? "Since she learned by doing," Nathan said evenly, meeting the older man's gaze. "I heard she has a gift for healing animals." Thomas snorted. "A gift? That is rich. Girl cannot read her own name, but supposedly she has gifts." He turned and went back into the house, leaving the door open behind him in a way that suggested he would be watching. Delilah's face had gone pale. "I am sorry," she whispered. "He is not always pleased with me." "That is his failing, not yours," Nathan said. He handed her the lead rope. "Now, tell me what you see when you look at this horse." He watched as Delilah approached the gelding, her movements slow and calm. She ran her hands down the horse's leg, her touch gentle but firm, her fingers probing carefully around the swollen joint. The horse, which had been skittish with the ranch veterinarian, stood quietly for her. "He trusts you already," Nathan observed. "Animals can tell when you mean them no harm," Delilah said. She straightened up. "The swelling is not hot, which is good, and see here the way he is standing. He is still putting some weight on it. That means it pains him, but not terribly. We can help him." For the next hour, Delilah showed Nathan how to make the poultice, mixing comfrey leaves she had gathered from near the creek with a binding agent, explaining how often to change it and how to tell if the horse was improving. She moved with confidence when talking about this, her usual hesitancy falling away. This was her language, Nathan realized. Not English letters on a page, but the language of growing things and healing, of patience and observation. "You could sell these poultices," Nathan said. "People would pay good money for something that works this well." Delilah shook her head. "No one would buy remedies from someone like me. They would say I was trying to cheat them because I cannot read or write." "Then I will tell them it works," Nathan said. "My word carries weight in these parts." She looked at him with such gratitude that it made his chest ache. "Why are you being kind to me? What do you want?" "I want to court you properly," Nathan said. "I want to take you to the church social next month. I want people to see what I see when I look at you." "And what is that?" "Someone remarkable," he said simply. Delilah turned away, but not before he saw tears glimmer in her eyes. "You will change your mind. Once you know me better, once you see how I struggle with things others find simple, you will realize I am not worth your time." Nathan stepped around to face her. "Let me be the judge of what my time is worth. And let me tell you something, Miss Armstrong. I have known plenty of people who can read and cipher and quote Shakespeare, and most of them do not have half your wisdom. You see the world clearly. You notice things others miss. You have compassion. Those are rare gifts. My father says I am a burden." "Your father," Nathan said carefully, "loves you but does not understand you. There is a difference." They stood there in the dusty yard, the September sun warm on their shoulders, and something passed between them that was deeper than words. Nathan knew he was falling for this woman, falling fast and hard, and he did not care who thought him foolish for it. Over the next few weeks, Nathan found every excuse to visit the Armstrong homestead. He brought other horses that needed tending. He asked Delilah's advice about which vegetables would grow best in the rocky soil at the ranch. He fixed the loose board on the Armstrong barn and repaired their chicken coop door. And slowly, gradually, Delilah began to open up to him. She told him about her childhood, about how her mother had died when she was 13, about how she had tried so hard to learn reading but the letters would swim on the page and refuse to stay in order. She told him about the children at the schoolhouse who had mocked her, about the teacher who had finally told her father that she was unteachable and should just stay home. She told him about the loneliness of being different, of being the one people whispered about. In turn, Nathan told her about his own life. He told her about growing up in Ohio, about his father who drank himself to death, and his mother who worked herself into an early grave trying to hold the family together. He told her about heading west at 18 with nothing but a horse and a saddle, about learning the cowboy trade on the brutal cattle drives where men died of thirst or stampedes or simple bad luck. He told her about the dream he had of owning his own ranch someday, a place where he could build something lasting. "You will have that dream," Delilah said one afternoon as they sat on the porch of her house, shelling peas from her garden. Thomas was in town, and they had the rare luxury of privacy. You are the kind of man who makes things happen." "So are you," Nathan said. "You just do it quietly." She shook her head. "I keep a house and tend a garden. That is not the same as building a ranch." "It is exactly the same," Nathan argued. "You are building something every day. You are making life grow where there was nothing. That is what ranching is, Delilah. It is not about reading contracts or keeping ledgers. It is about understanding the land and the animals, about knowing when to push and when to let things be. You understand those things better than anyone I have ever met." She was quiet for a moment, her fingers working the peas with practiced ease. Then she said, "You make me feel like maybe I am not broken." Nathan reached over and took her hand, stilling her fingers. "You are not broken. You are whole and perfect exactly as you are." When he kissed her for the first time that afternoon, with the September breeze carrying the scent of prairie flowers and the distant sound of her chickens clucking contentedly, Nathan knew with absolute certainty that he wanted to spend the rest of his life with this woman. She kissed him back tentatively at first, then with growing confidence, and when they finally pulled apart she was smiling. "I love you," Nathan said, because there was no point in pretending otherwise. "I know it is fast, and I know people will say I am crazy, but I love you, Delilah Armstrong." "I love you too," she whispered. "I have loved you since that first day when you told me I was wise." The church social in October was the first time Nathan and Delilah appeared together publicly as a courting couple, and the gossip spread through Medicine Bow like wildfire. People talked. Of course they talked. They said Nathan was being charitable, that he felt sorry for poor, simple Delilah Armstrong. They said he would tire of her soon enough, once he realized what a burden she would be. They said it was a shame to see a capable young man throw his life away on a woman who could not even read. Nathan heard the talk and did not care. He walked into that social with Delilah on his arm, her hair done up pretty and wearing a new dress she had sewn herself, and he made sure everyone saw how proud he was to be with her. When Mrs. Henderson made a snide comment about hoping Delilah had not gotten confused and worn her nightgown by mistake, Nathan stepped forward and said in a voice that carried, "Miss Armstrong made that dress herself, and it is finer than anything you could buy in a store. She has talents you could not comprehend if you tried." The room went silent. Mrs. Henderson's face turned red, and Delilah squeezed Nathan's hand so hard he thought she might break his fingers. Later, as they danced to the fiddle music, Delilah said, "You did not have to defend me like that. Now people will talk even more." "Let them talk," Nathan said, spinning her under his arm. "I would defend you against an army if I had to." "Why?" she asked, looking up at him with those green eyes that had captured his heart. "Why do you care so much about what people think of me?" "Because you deserve to be seen," Nathan said. "Really seen for who you are. And because I love you, and when you love someone, you stand beside them no matter what anyone else says." That night, when Nathan drove Delilah home in her wagon with his horse tied to the back, they talked about the future. Nathan had been saving money for years, and he was close to having enough to make an offer on a piece of land he had his eye on, about 10 miles west of Medicine Bow. It was good grazing land with a creek running through it, perfect for starting a small cattle operation. "I will own that land by spring," Nathan said. "And when I do, I want to build a house on it. A real house, not just a lined shack. And I want you to be in that house with me as my wife." Delilah went very still beside him. "You want to marry me, more than I have ever wanted anything. But Nathan, think about what you would be taking on. A wife who cannot read, who cannot help with correspondence or keep ledger books. I would be a liability to you." Nathan pulled the wagon to a stop and turned to face her. "Listen to me, Delilah. I do not need someone who can keep ledgers. I can do that myself, or hire someone if need be. What I need is a partner who understands the land and the animals. Someone who can look at a sick cow and know what is wrong with it. Someone who can grow food and make medicine and turn a house into a home. Someone who will stand beside me when times are hard and help me remember what matters. That is what you are. That is what you give me. You truly mean that, she said, and it was not a question. With everything I am, Nathan said. She kissed him then, there in the stopped wagon under the Wyoming stars, and when she pulled back she said, "Yes, yes, I will marry you, Nathan Hollister." The next hurdle was Thomas Armstrong. Nathan rode out to the homestead the following Sunday, determined to ask for Delilah's hand properly. He found Thomas in the barn, mucking out stalls, and helped him finish the work before broaching the subject. "Mr. Armstrong, I want to marry your daughter," Nathan said plainly. "I am here to ask your permission and your blessing." Thomas leaned on his pitchfork and studied Nathan with those hard eyes. "You know what you would be getting yourself into, a wife who cannot read or write, who will never be able to help you with business matters." "I know exactly who Delilah is," Nathan said firmly, "and I love her for it. She is wise in ways that matter, Mr. Armstrong. She understands animals and plants, she can heal and grow things, and she has a good heart. Those are the qualities I want in a wife." "You are young," Thomas said. "You do not understand how hard life can be when your partner cannot keep up." "With respect, sir, Delilah keeps up just fine. She works harder than anyone I know. Just because she learns differently does not mean she is less capable." Thomas was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Her mother thought the same thing. Catherine always insisted Delilah was special, that she just needed to be understood. I thought it was wishful thinking from a mother who could not accept her child's limitations." "It was not wishful thinking," Nathan said. "It was the truth." Thomas sighed, and for the first time Nathan saw something like sorrow in the older man's face. "I have been hard on her," he admitted. "After Catherine died, I did not know how to handle Delilah on my own. I thought if I pushed her, she would somehow become normal. Instead, I just made her feel small." "It is not too late to change that," Nathan said gently. "No, I suppose it is not." Thomas extended his hand. "You have my permission to marry her, and my blessing for what it is worth. Treat her better than I have." "I intend to treat her like the treasure she is," Nathan said, shaking the older man's hand. The wedding took place in December of 1882, in the small church in Medicine Bow with half the town in attendance. Delilah wore a dress she had made herself, white with blue trim, and she carried a bouquet of dried wildflowers. Nathan wore his best suit, the one he had been saving for special occasions, and when the preacher asked if he took this woman to be his wife, he said, "I do," with such conviction that people in the back pews heard him clearly. When it came time for Delilah to sign the marriage certificate, Nathan saw her hand hesitate over the paper. The preacher, a kind man named Reverend Walsh, said gently, "You can make your mark, Mrs. Hollister. That is perfectly legal." Delilah made a careful X where the preacher indicated, and Nathan signed his name beside it. Then he leaned over and whispered in her ear, "That X is worth more than all the signatures in the world because it means you are mine and I am yours." She smiled at him through happy tears, and they walked back down the aisle together as husband and wife, ready to face whatever came next. They spent the winter in a small cabin Nathan rented on the Double Creek Ranch property, saving money and planning for the spring when they would make their move to their own land. Those winter months were some of the happiest of Nathan's life. He would come home from a long day of work to find Delilah had made stew or bread, the cabin warm and welcoming. They would sit by the fire and talk about their dreams, or Nathan would read aloud from newspapers and books while Delilah listened and asked thoughtful questions. "Tell me again about the land," she would say, and Nathan would describe the property he wanted to buy. The way the creek curved through it, the stand of cottonwood trees that would provide shade in summer, the protected valley that would shelter cattle in winter. "We will build our house there," Nathan would say, pointing to an imaginary spot, "right where we can see the mountains to the west. And we will have a barn here and corrals there, and you can have as big a garden as you want." "I want chickens," Delilah said, "and maybe a milk cow. And I want to plant herbs, all the kinds that can be used for medicine. I could make poultices and tonics to sell in town." "You absolutely should," Nathan encouraged. "Your remedies are better than anything the doctor has." In February, Nathan made his offer on the land, and it was accepted. He was now the proud owner of 160 acres of Wyoming territory, purchased under the Homestead Act with the money he had saved from 8 years of hard work. It was not a large spread, but it was theirs, and it was a start. As soon as the spring thaw came, they moved onto the property and began building. Nathan was handy with tools, and several of the men from the Double Creek Ranch came to help in their free time. Even Thomas Armstrong showed up one weekend, hammer in hand, ready to help build his daughter's home. "I want to do right by her," Thomas told Nathan as they worked on framing the walls. "I have been thinking about what you said about how I treated her. You were right. I let my disappointment blind me to who she really is." "Tell her that," Nathan said. "She needs to hear it from you." That evening, as they all sat around the campfire eating dinner, Thomas pulled Delilah aside. Nathan watched from a distance as father and daughter talked, saw Delilah's face crumple, saw Thomas pull her into an awkward hug. When she came back to Nathan's side later, her eyes were red, but she was smiling. "He apologized," she said wonderingly. "He said he was wrong about me, that he can see now I am capable in ways he did not understand. He said he is proud of me." Nathan pulled her close, as he should be. By May, the house was finished. It was small, just 3 rooms, but it was solid and well built with a stone fireplace and glass windows. Delilah cried the first time she walked through the completed house, touching the walls as if she could not quite believe they were real. "This is ours," she kept saying. "Really ours, really ours," Nathan confirmed. "And we will fill it with love and laughter and, God willing, children someday." They spent that first summer establishing their ranch. Nathan bought a small herd of cattle, just 20 head to start with, and 3 horses. Delilah planted an enormous garden and began gathering herbs from the surrounding countryside. She made poultices and tonics and salves, and Nathan took them into Medicine Bow to sell. At first people were skeptical, but when a rancher's prize mare recovered from a serious leg infection after using Delilah's remedy when the veterinarian had given up hope, word spread quickly. Soon people were coming out to the Hollister ranch specifically to buy Delilah's medicines. She would meet them shyly, explain what each remedy was for and how to use it, and charge fair prices. The money was not much, but it helped, and more than that, it gave Delilah confidence. "People are starting to see you the way I do," Nathan told her one evening as they sat on the porch of their house, watching the sun set over the mountains. "They are starting to understand that you have value." "I am starting to believe it myself," Delilah admitted. "For so long I thought I was worthless because I could not read, but I am good at other things. Important things." "You are good at essential things," Nathan corrected. "Reading is a useful skill, but it is not the measure of a person's worth." That fall, Delilah discovered she was pregnant. She told Nathan one evening after dinner, her hands twisted nervously in her apron. "I am going to have a baby," she said. "In the spring, I think." Nathan let out a whoop of joy and picked her up, spinning her around until she laughed and begged him to put her down. "We are going to be parents," he said, his face split by an enormous grin. "You are going to be a mother. Are you happy?" she asked, searching his face. "Happy, Delilah, I am over the moon. There is nothing in this world I want more than to have a family with you." As winter set in and Delilah's belly grew, Nathan found himself marveling at how their lives had changed in just over a year. They had their own land, their own home, a growing business, and a baby on the way. People in Medicine Bow had stopped gossiping about them, or at least they gossiped less. The Hollisters were becoming an established part of the community. Mrs. Henderson still made the occasional snide comment, but even she had to admit that Delilah's herbal remedies were effective. When her own husband came down with a persistent cough that winter, she reluctantly bought a bottle of Delilah's honey and horehound syrup. It cleared up his cough within days, and Mrs. Henderson was marginally less hostile after that. The baby came in early April of 1884, delivered by a midwife from town with Nathan pacing nervously outside the bedroom. When the midwife finally emerged and told him he had a healthy son, Nathan rushed into the room to find Delilah exhausted but beaming, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in blankets. "A boy," she said softly. "We have a son, Nathan." Nathan sat on the edge of the bed and looked down at his son's small, perfect face. "He is beautiful. You are beautiful. What should we name him?" They had discussed names for months and finally settled on James, after Nathan's father before the drinking had destroyed him. James Thomas Hollister, they decided, giving him Thomas as a middle name in honor of Delilah's father. Those first months of parenthood were exhausting and wonderful in equal measure. Delilah took to motherhood naturally, nursing the baby and soothing him when he cried, somehow knowing instinctively what he needed. Nathan would come in from working the ranch to find her singing to James, old songs her mother had taught her, and the sight of them together made his heart ache with love. "You are a wonderful mother," he told her one evening as she rocked James to sleep. "How do you know?" She asked with a tired smile. "This is all new to me. I know because I see how content he is with you. I see how he calms when you hold him. Babies know when they are loved, Delilah. James knows." As James grew from infant to toddler, Nathan watched Delilah teach their son about the world with the same patient wisdom she had shown Nathan about the lame horse years ago. She taught James the names of plants and animals, not by reading them from books, but by showing him directly, taking him on walks around the ranch and letting him touch and smell and experience everything. When James was 3 years old and beginning to talk in full sentences, Nathan noticed something that made him smile. The boy would point to wildflowers and name them correctly, would identify birds by their calls, and could tell when a cow was not feeling well. He was learning Delilah's way of seeing the world, the way that did not depend on written words but on observation and connection. "He is like you," Nathan told Delilah one summer evening as they watched James carefully examine a caterpillar he had found. "What do you mean?" "He learns by doing, by experiencing. He has your gift for understanding living things." Delilah looked worried. "What if he cannot read either? What if he is like me and people call him simple?" Nathan took her hand. "Then we will teach him that there are many kinds of intelligence, and that his way of learning is just as valid as any other, and we will make sure he never doubts his worth the way you were made to doubt yours." "You are a good father," Delilah said softly. "I am trying to be," Nathan replied. "I am trying to give him what my father could not give me, and what your father could not give you. I am trying to give him love and acceptance and the knowledge that he is enough, exactly as he is." The ranch continued to prosper. By 1887, Nathan had expanded his herd to 50 head of cattle and was making enough money to hire occasional help during busy seasons. Delilah's medicine business had grown too. She now sold her remedies in 3 different towns, and people would travel for miles to consult with her about sick animals or persistent ailments. One day in late summer, a well-dressed woman from Cheyenne arrived at the ranch in a fancy buggy. She introduced herself as Mrs. Caroline Mitchell and explained that she had heard about Delilah's herbal expertise from multiple sources. "I run a boarding house in Cheyenne," Mrs. Mitchell said, "and I have been looking for someone who can provide me with quality medicinal supplies." "I understand you make everything yourself, Mrs. Hollister." "Yes, madam," Delilah said, wiping her hands nervously on her apron. "I gather the herbs and make the remedies according to recipes my mother taught me." "I would like to place a standing order," Mrs. Mitchell said. "Monthly deliveries of your most popular items. I am prepared to pay you $50 a month for a standard shipment." Delilah's eyes went wide. $50 a month was serious money, enough to make a real difference in their finances. But Nathan could see the worry on her face and understood what she was thinking. "My wife's remedies are in high demand," Nathan said smoothly. "But I should mention that Mrs. Hollister does not read or write. I handle all the written correspondence and record-keeping for the business." He said it plainly, matter-of-factly, watching to see how Mrs. Mitchell would react. The woman glanced at Delilah with surprise, then shrugged. "I am not looking to hire a secretary," Mrs. Mitchell said. "I am looking to buy quality medicine. If you can provide that, Mrs. Hollister, I do not care if you can recite Shakespeare or not." Relief flooded Delilah's face. "I can provide it, madam. I promise you will not be disappointed." They struck the deal, and suddenly the Hollisters had a reliable, substantial source of income beyond the cattle. Nathan helped Delilah scale up her production, building her a dedicated workshed where she could dry herbs and mix remedies without being disturbed. They hired a young woman from town to help with the housework, so Delilah could focus more time on her medicine making. "We are doing well," Nathan said one night as they lay in bed, James asleep in the small bedroom they had added onto the house. "Better than I ever dreamed." "I never thought I would have this," Delilah admitted. "A home, a family, work that people value. I thought I would spend my life being pitied." "You were always worthy of this," Nathan said, pulling her close. "You just needed someone to see it, and now the whole territory is starting to see it." In the fall of 1888, Delilah gave birth to their second child, a daughter they named Margaret Rose. Nathan had insisted on naming her after Delilah's mother, Catherine Margaret, taking the middle name. Little Maggie, as they called her, had her mother's green eyes and her father's dark hair, and from the start she was a determined, spirited child. Watching Delilah with their 2 children, Nathan often thought about the first day he had seen her in the general store, trying to buy flour while Mrs. Henderson insulted her intelligence. That frightened, ashamed woman seemed like someone from a different lifetime. The Delilah who existed now was confident, successful, and secure in her value. She ran a thriving business, raised healthy children, and managed a ranch household with competence and grace. One day in the summer of 1889, Delilah rode into town with Nathan to pick up supplies. As they walked down the main street of Medicine Bow, people greeted them warmly. The blacksmith's wife stopped to ask Delilah's advice about her daughter's persistent cough. The banker tipped his hat and congratulated Nathan on his expanding herd. Even Mrs. Henderson managed a tight smile and asked if Delilah had any more of that liniment for sore muscles. As they drove home that evening, Nathan said, "Do you remember the first time I saw you in Henderson's store?" "How could I forget?" Delilah replied. "I was so ashamed. Mrs. Henderson was treating me like I was stupid, and I believed she was right." And now she buys your medicine and asks your advice, Nathan pointed out. Delilah smiled. I suppose things have changed. You changed them, Nathan said, by refusing to accept what people said you were and becoming who you really are instead. We changed them, Delilah corrected. You gave me the courage to believe in myself, Nathan. Without you, I would still be living in my father's house, thinking I was worthless. You were never worthless, Nathan said, but I am glad I could help you see that. They drove home in comfortable silence, their children dozing in the back of the wagon, the Wyoming sunset painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. Nathan thought about how strange and wonderful life was, how a chance encounter in a general store had led to all of this. Love, family, prosperity, and purpose. That winter, Thomas Armstrong fell ill with pneumonia. Delilah moved her father into their house and nursed him through the worst of it, using every remedy she knew. For 3 weeks the outcome was uncertain, but finally, Thomas turned a corner and began to recover. One afternoon, while he was convalescing, sitting in a chair by the fire with a blanket over his knees, Thomas called Delilah over. I need to tell you something, he said. Something I should have said years ago. Delilah sat down beside him, her hands folded in her lap. I was wrong about you, Thomas said bluntly. Wrong in every way a father can be wrong about his child. You were different from what I expected, and instead of celebrating that difference, I tried to force you to be something you were not. I made you feel small and stupid, and I will regret that for the rest of my life. Father, you already apologized. Let me finish, Thomas interrupted. I have been living in this house for weeks now, watching you manage your business and your family. I have seen people come from miles away to buy your medicines. I have seen your children thrive under your care. I have seen your husband look at you like you are the sun and the moon and the stars, and I have realized something. What is that? Delilah asked softly. You are not just capable. You are exceptional. You have built a life that matters, not in spite of being unable to read, but by focusing on what you can do instead of what you cannot. You are wise in ways that I, with all my book learning, will never be. I am proud of you, daughter, so very proud. Delilah's eyes filled with tears. Thank you, Father, that means everything to me. Thomas reached out and took her hand. Your mother knew, she always knew how special you were. I wish I had listened to her. She would be happy to see us now, Delilah said. Happy to know we made peace. She would be proud of you too, Thomas said. Prouder than I can express. Thomas recovered fully and moved back to his own homestead, but the relationship between father and daughter had been healed in a way that enriched both their lives. He became a regular visitor at the Hollister ranch, playing with his grandchildren and helping with chores when he was able. The years rolled on, bringing changes and challenges but also deep contentment. The ranch grew to 200 acres through careful saving and a fortuitous land purchase. The cattle herd numbered over 100 head. Delilah's medicine business expanded to supply shops in 5 different towns across Wyoming territory. In 1892, when James was 8 and Maggie was 4, Delilah gave birth to twins, a boy and a girl they named Samuel and Sarah. The birth was difficult, and for a few frightening hours Nathan thought he might lose her, but Delilah was strong and pulled through. With 4 children, the house that had once seemed spacious now felt cramped, so Nathan began planning an addition. We need more bedrooms, he said, sketching plans on paper while Delilah looked over his shoulder. And maybe a larger kitchen. Your medicine business has outgrown the workshed too. We should build you a proper still room. This all costs money, Delilah said practically. We have the money, Nathan assured her. You have earned it with your remedies and the ranch is doing better than ever. We can afford to expand. The expansion took 2 summers to complete, But by the fall of 1893, they had a house with 6 bedrooms, a large kitchen, and a dedicated stillroom where Delilah could work on her medicines. It was the finest house in the county, people said, built by a cowboy who had started with nothing and a woman who could not read. One evening, sitting on the expanded porch and watching their children play in the yard, Nathan said, "We have made a good life here." "Better than good," Delilah replied. "Sometimes I have to pinch myself to believe it is real." "It is real," Nathan said. "It is real because you are real, because your gifts are real, because love is real." "Do you ever regret it?" Delilah asked. "Marrying me instead of someone who could help with ledgers and correspondence." Nathan looked at her in surprise. "Where is this coming from?" "I overheard some women talking in town last week," Delilah admitted. "They were saying you could have done better, that you settled when you married me." "Then those women are fools," Nathan said firmly. "Delilah, look around you. Look at what we have built together. This ranch, this family, this life. None of it would exist without you. Your wisdom, your skills, your love. You did not hold me back. You made everything possible. Truly, truly." He pulled her close, kissing the top of her head. "You are the best thing that ever happened to me. I knew it the first day I saw you, and I know it even more surely now. You are my partner, my love, my everything." Delilah relaxed against him. "I love you, Nathan Hollister." "I love you too, Delilah Hollister. More than words can say." In 1896, Wyoming achieved statehood, and the Hollister family celebrated with the rest of the territory. By now, James was 12 and showing signs of wanting to follow in his father's footsteps as a rancher. He was good with cattle and horses, patient and hardworking. Maggie was 8 and had her mother's gift for plants and healing. She would follow Delilah around the stillroom, asking endless questions about which herbs did what and how to prepare them. The twins, Samuel and Sarah, were 4 and full of mischief, keeping Nathan and Delilah constantly on their toes. The house was loud and chaotic and full of love, everything Nathan had dreamed of when he was a lonely young cowboy riding the cattle trails. One Sunday afternoon, the whole family loaded into the wagon and drove into Medicine Bow for church services. As they walked into the church, Nathan noticed people smiling at them, nodding respectfully. The Hollisters were pillars of the community now, respected and admired. After the service, several people approached Delilah to ask about purchasing medicines or to thank her for remedies that had helped them. A young mother whose baby had been suffering from colic grasped Delilah's hands and said, "Your gripe water saved us. I do not know what we would have done without it." "I am glad I could help," Delilah said warmly. As they drove home that afternoon, Nathan said, "You remember what I told you that first day, that you were wise in ways books do not teach?" "I remember," Delilah said. "I was right," Nathan said. "But I did not know the half of it. You are not just wise, Delilah. You are brilliant. You have healed people, built a business, raised 4 wonderful children, and turned a house into a home. You have done all of that without reading a single word, and that makes it all the more remarkable." "I could not have done any of it without you," Delilah said. "You believed in me when no one else did. You gave me the courage to believe in myself." "We made each other better," Nathan said. "That is what love does." In the spring of 1898, Thomas Armstrong passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 72. They buried him next to his wife in the Medicine Bow Cemetery, and the whole town turned out for the funeral. In his will, Thomas left his small homestead to Delilah, along with a letter that Nathan read aloud to her afterward. "My dear daughter," the letter said, "I spent too many years being blind to your true worth. You were never simple, never less than. You were always exceptional, and it took a cowboy with clear eyes to see what I could not. I am sorry for the years I wasted making you feel small. You are the finest thing I ever had a hand in creating, and I am proud to have been your father. Live well, my girl. You have earned every happiness. With all my love, Father. Delilah cried when Nathan finished reading, but they were tears of healing, not grief. He understood in the end, she said. That is what matters. They sold Thomas's homestead and used the money to buy more cattle and expand Delilah's medicine business further. By 1900, she was supplying remedies to shops all across Wyoming and even into Colorado and Montana. Nathan had to hire a bookkeeper to help manage the finances because the business had grown so large. That fall, James announced that he wanted to go to agricultural college to learn modern ranching techniques. He was 18 now, a young man rather than a boy, and Nathan was proud of his ambition. You support this? Delilah asked Nathan privately. You want him to leave? I want him to follow his dreams, Nathan said. The same way I followed mine. He will come back, Delilah. This ranch is in his blood, but let him go learn and grow and become his own man. So James left for college in Laramie, and the house felt emptier without him. But Maggie was 14 now and increasingly taking over the medicine business, learning everything her mother could teach her. The twins were 8 and full of energy, and Nathan and Delilah found themselves busier than ever. One evening in the summer of 1901, as they sat on their porch watching the sun set over their land, Nathan said, Do you ever think about how far we have come? All the time, Delilah said. Sometimes it feels like a dream. It is not a dream, Nathan said. It is what you deserve. What we both deserve. We worked hard, loved each other, and built something real. I wish I could go back and tell that frightened girl in the general store what her life would become, Delilah said softly. I wish I could tell her that being different is not the same as being less. That she has value exactly as she is. In a way, you do tell her, Nathan said. Every time you help someone, every time you teach Maggie about herbs, every time you show our children that there are many ways to be smart and capable. You tell that story every day. Delilah leaned her head on his shoulder. Thank you for seeing me, Nathan, for really seeing me when everyone else looked right through me. Thank you for letting me, Nathan replied, for trusting me with your heart. They sat in comfortable silence as the stars began to appear in the darkening sky. Somewhere in the distance, cattle lowed softly. In the house behind them, they could hear Maggie reading aloud to the twins, a sound that always made Delilah smile. She could not read the words herself, but she loved hearing them, loved the way stories came alive in her daughter's voice. In 1903, James graduated from agricultural college and returned home to help run the ranch. He brought with him new ideas about crop rotation and selective breeding that helped increase their productivity. He also brought home a wife, a smart young woman named Elizabeth, who had been studying to be a teacher. Elizabeth was kind and unpretentious, and she never once made Delilah feel inferior for not being able to read. You have wisdom that cannot be taught in schools, Elizabeth told Delilah one day as they worked together in the kitchen. I may have book learning, but you have life learning, and that is just as valuable. You are a wise woman yourself, Delilah said warmly. I am glad James found you. Maggie married in 1905 at the age of 19, wedding a young doctor from Cheyenne who was fascinated by herbal medicine and wanted to learn everything Delilah could teach him. Dr. Michael Foster was a good man who treated Delilah with great respect, often consulting her about difficult cases and incorporating her remedies into his practice. The twins, Samuel and Sarah, were 13 now, both bright and capable in their own ways. Samuel wanted to be a veterinarian, while Sarah dreamed of opening her own shop selling herbal remedies. The Hollister children were making their marks on the world, each in their own fashion. By 1907, Nathan and Delilah were grandparents 3 times over. James and Elizabeth had 2 sons, and Maggie and Michael had a daughter. The big house that Nathan had built was often full of family on Sundays. 3 generations gathered around the dinner table, talking and laughing and making memories. One Sunday evening, after everyone had left and the house was quiet again, Nathan and Delilah sat on their porch, a ritual they had maintained for over 20 years. "We are getting old," Delilah said, looking at her work-worn hands. "We are getting seasoned," Nathan corrected with a smile. "Like good leather." "You always know just what to say," Delilah said, laughing. "I've had a lot of practice," Nathan replied. He reached over and took her hand. "Do you remember what I told you the day I asked to court you? You said I was wise in ways books do not teach," Delilah said. "I have never forgotten." "It is still true," Nathan said. "More true now than ever. You have lived a remarkable life, Delilah Hollister. You took what people called a deficit and turned it into your greatest strength. You focused on what you could do instead of what you could not, and you built an empire on compassion and wisdom." "We built it together," Delilah said firmly. "I could not have done any of it without you." "Then we are both lucky," Nathan said. "Lucky to have found each other. Lucky to have built this life together." In 1910, as Nathan approached his 54th birthday and Delilah her 48th, they decided to step back from the day-to-day operations of the ranch and medicine business. James took over full management of the cattle operation, while Maggie and Sarah partnered to run the expanded medicine business, which now had a proper shop in Medicine Bow and contracts with suppliers across 3 states. Nathan and Delilah found themselves with time to simply enjoy life. They took long rides across their land, visited their children and grandchildren frequently, and sat on their porch every evening watching the sun set. Nathan read aloud to Delilah from books and newspapers, and she would discuss the ideas with him, her insights often sharper than those of the authors themselves. One day, a young reporter from the Wyoming Tribune came to interview them for a story about successful Wyoming businesses. She was particularly interested in Delilah's herbal medicine empire and how it had started. "Mrs. Hollister, you have built a thriving business that employs 12 people and serves customers across multiple states," the reporter said. "What do you attribute your success to?" Delilah glanced at Nathan, then said carefully, "I have always believed that everyone has gifts, even if they are not the gifts society typically values. I cannot read or write, but I can observe and remember and understand living things. I focused on developing those gifts rather than mourning what I lacked." The reporter's eyes widened. "You cannot read, but you run such a sophisticated operation." "My husband handles all the written aspects of the business," Delilah explained, "and now my daughters do as well. But the formulations, the understanding of which herbs work for which ailments, the ability to look at a plant and know its properties, those are my contributions. We all bring different strengths to the table." "That is remarkable," the reporter said, scribbling notes. "You are living proof that formal education is not the only path to success." When the article was published a few weeks later, it created quite a stir. People across Wyoming read about the woman who could not read but had built a medicine business worth thousands of dollars. Some were inspired, others were skeptical, but everyone was talking about Delilah Hollister. Letters began to arrive, forwarded from the newspaper. They were from parents of children who struggled in school, from adults who had never learned to read, from people who felt like failures because they learned differently. Nathan read the letters aloud to Delilah, and she dictated responses, offering encouragement and hope. "You should tell them your story," Nathan urged. "The whole story from the beginning. People need to hear it." So Delilah did. Nathan wrote it down as she spoke, and they submitted it to the Tribune as a first-person account. The response was overwhelming. The newspaper received hundreds of letters in response, and other papers across the West reprinted the story. Delilah became something of a minor celebrity, the woman who had overcome what others saw as a disability to build a remarkable life. But through all the attention and acclaim, Delilah remained humble and grounded. "I am just living my life," she told Nathan. "The same life I have always lived. I did not change. People's perception of me changed." "That is the point," Nathan said. "You are showing people that their perceptions can be wrong. That is a valuable lesson." In 1914, as the world teetered on the brink of war in Europe, the Hollister family gathered to celebrate Nathan and Delilah's 32nd wedding anniversary. The house was packed with children, grandchildren, and friends. Thomas Armstrong Jr., their grandson, made a toast. "To my grandparents," he said, raising his glass, "who proved that love sees what others miss, that wisdom comes in many forms, and that the best kind of education is learning to see the value in yourself and others. Happy anniversary." Everyone cheered and drank, and Nathan pulled Delilah close, kissing her soundly to the accompaniment of whistles and applause from their family. Later that night, alone in their bedroom, Delilah said, "I have been thinking about something." "What is that?" "About legacy. About what we leave behind when we are gone." Nathan pulled her into his arms. "We are not going anywhere for a long time yet. But when we do, we will leave behind 4 children, a dozen grandchildren, a successful ranch, a thriving business, and proof that love and belief in someone can change everything." "I want to leave more," Delilah said. "I want to leave hope. For all the people who struggle like I did, who feel like they are less than because they learn differently. I want them to know they have value." "You have already given them that," Nathan assured her. "Every day you live authentically. Every time you help someone. Every story that gets told about the wise woman who could not read but knew everything that mattered, that is your legacy." The years continued to roll past, bringing both joys and sorrows. In 1918, the influenza epidemic swept through Wyoming, and Delilah worked tirelessly to help, distributing her remedies for free to those who needed them and nursing the sick alongside local doctors. Her efforts saved lives and further cemented her reputation as a healer and a woman of great compassion. By 1920, Nathan was 64 and Delilah was 58. They had been married for 38 years, together for even longer, and their love had only deepened with time. They still sat on their porch every evening, still held hands like young sweethearts, still looked at each other with the same wonder they had felt decades ago. One evening, as they watched the sun paint the sky in shades of gold and amber, Nathan said, "If I could go back and live my life over, I would not change a single thing." "Not even the hard parts?" Delilah asked. "Especially not the hard parts," Nathan said. "They led me to you. Everything led me to you." "I feel the same," Delilah said softly. "You gave me a life I never dreamed possible. You gave me love, family, purpose, and the knowledge that I am enough." "You were always enough," Nathan said. "I just helped you see it." They sat in comfortable silence as the stars began to emerge, the same stars they had been watching together for nearly 4 decades. The ranch stretched out around them, 200 acres of Wyoming land that they had tamed and nurtured. In the house behind them, they could hear Maggie and Sarah working in the stillroom, preparing the next batch of remedies. On the far side of the property, James was likely checking on the cattle one last time before dark. Their family, their legacy, their life's work, it was all around them, solid and real. In 1925, The Medicine Bow Town Council voted to name a new community center after Delilah Armstrong Hollister, in recognition of her contributions to the health and well-being of the region. At the dedication ceremony, the mayor gave a speech about Delilah's remarkable journey from a girl people called simple to a woman who had changed countless lives. Mrs. Hollister represents the very best of the Wyoming spirit, the mayor said. She faced challenges that would have broken many people, but instead of giving up, she found her own path. She proved that intelligence comes in many forms, and that wisdom is not measured by how many books you have read, but by how much good you do in the world. Delilah, now 63 with silver threading through her honey-colored hair, stood to speak. Nathan had written down some notes for her, things she wanted to say, but as she stood at the podium she found the words came naturally. "I am honored by this recognition," she said, her voice steady and clear. "But I want to be clear about something. I did not achieve anything alone. My husband, Nathan, believed in me when I did not believe in myself. My children supported me and helped build my business. My community eventually learned to see past their prejudices and judge me by my actions rather than my limitations. We are all products of the people who love us and support us. If I have done any good in this world, it is because I was fortunate enough to have people who saw my potential and helped me reach it." The applause was thunderous, and as Delilah returned to her seat, Nathan squeezed her hand. "That was perfect," he whispered. "I meant every word," she replied. By 1930, as the Great Depression began to grip the nation, the Hollister family was in a position to help others. The ranch had weathered financial storms before and was on solid ground. Delilah's medicine business, now run entirely by her daughters and granddaughters, continued to thrive because people always needed affordable healing remedies. Nathan and Delilah, now in their 70s, found themselves playing the role of family matriarch and patriarch. Their house was always open to family members who needed help, and they shared their resources generously. They had lived through hard times and knew the value of community and compassion. One winter evening, sitting by the fire with blankets over their knees, Delilah said, "Do you ever think about that first day in the general store?" "Often," Nathan admitted. "I think about how close I came to not speaking to you, to just letting you walk away. It frightens me to think how different my life would have been." "Mine too," Delilah said. "If you had not seen something in me worth knowing, I would have spent my whole life believing I was worthless." "You were never worthless," Nathan said, the same words he had spoken to her so many times over the years. "You were a treasure waiting to be discovered." In 1935, Nathan's health began to decline. He was 79 years old and had lived a long, hard-working life. The doctors said his heart was wearing out, that there was nothing to be done but make him comfortable. Delilah refused to accept this. She tried every remedy she knew, consulted with doctors from as far away as Denver, and prayed harder than she had ever prayed before. But some things even love and medicine cannot fix. On a cold January morning in 1936, Nathan Hollister passed away peacefully in his sleep with Delilah holding his hand. He was 79 years old and had been married to the love of his life for 54 years. The funeral was the largest Medicine Bow had ever seen. People came from across Wyoming and the surrounding states to pay their respects to the cowboy who had built a ranch, a family, and a legacy of love. But more than anything, they came to support Delilah, who had lost her partner, her advocate, her truest friend. In the weeks after Nathan's death, Delilah struggled. For more than half a century, he had been her constant companion, the voice that encouraged her, the presence that made her feel safe. Without him, the world felt cold and empty, but she was not alone. Her children and grandchildren surrounded her with love. James moved back into the main house to keep her company. Maggie visited every day. The twins, now grown with families of their own, made sure she was never left to grieve in solitude. One day, Maggie found Delilah in the still room, working on a new remedy formulation. "Mama, you do not have to work," Maggie said gently. "We can handle the business." "I know," Delilah said, "but your father always said that work is healing, that keeping busy helps the heart mend, and I think he was right." "He was usually right," Maggie said with a sad smile. "He was always right about the things that mattered," Delilah corrected. "He was right about me, right about us, right about love being the most important thing. I am going to honor his memory by living the way he taught me with purpose and courage and an open heart." And she did. Delilah lived for another 18 years after Nathan's death, remaining active in her business and her family. She saw her grandchildren marry and have children of their own. She saw the medicine business expand to include a laboratory and a team of trained herbalists. She saw the ranch grow to 500 acres, one of the most successful operations in Wyoming. In 1954, at the age of 92, Delilah Armstrong Hollister passed away peacefully surrounded by 4 generations of her family. She was buried next to Nathan under the wide Wyoming sky, her gravestone reading simply, "Delilah Armstrong Hollister. Healer, mother, wise woman. She saw the world clearly." At her funeral, her great-granddaughter stood and read from a journal that Nathan had kept, passages he had written about Delilah over the years. "They said she was simple because she could not read," the girl read, her young voice clear in the church. "But I said she was wise in ways books do not teach, and I spent 54 years married to her, and every day she proved me right. She taught me that intelligence has many forms, that love sees what others miss, and that the best kind of wisdom comes from observing the world with an open heart and a curious mind. She was the greatest gift of my life, and I will love her beyond death and into whatever comes next." There was not a dry eye in the church. The Hollister legacy continued long after both Nathan and Delilah were gone. The ranch prospered under the management of their descendants. The medicine business grew into a regional institution, eventually becoming a respected supplier of herbal remedies to health stores and clinics across the West. The Delilah Hollister Community Center in Medicine Bow still stands, hosting programs for children with learning differences, offering support for people who cannot read, and providing resources for anyone who feels marginalized by traditional education. But perhaps the greatest legacy Nathan and Delilah left was the story itself. The story of the cowboy who saw wisdom where others saw simplicity. The story of the woman who refused to be defined by what she could not do and instead built a life around what she could. The story of love that looks past surface judgments to see the truth beneath. It became a story mothers told their daughters, teachers told their students, and anyone who ever felt less than told themselves when they needed hope. It was proof that being different is not the same as being less, that there are many kinds of intelligence, and that the most important wisdom is the wisdom of the heart. In the end, Nathan had been right all those years ago in the dusty street of Medicine Bow. Delilah had not been simple. She had been wise in ways books do not teach, the wisdom of observation, of compassion, of connecting with the natural world, of seeing value where others saw only deficit. And that wisdom had built a legacy that lasted for generations, touching thousands of lives and changing the way people thought about intelligence, ability, and worth. The little girl who could not read had become a healer, a businesswoman, a mother and grandmother and great-grandmother, a pillar of her community. and proof that love and belief can transform everything. And the cowboy who saw her clearly had become her partner in building a life that mattered, a life full of love and purpose and meaning. Together, they had proved that the best kind of wisdom is not found in books but in living authentically, loving fully, and never allowing others to define your worth. They had proved that every person has gifts, even if those gifts are not the ones society typically values. And they had proved that when someone truly sees you, truly believes in you, you can accomplish things beyond your wildest dreams. Their story became legend in Wyoming, passed down through generations, a testament to the power of love and the many forms that wisdom can take. And whenever someone felt inadequate or less than, whenever someone struggled with being different, people would tell them about Nathan and Delilah Hollister, the cowboy and the healer who proved that being true to yourself is the greatest wisdom of all.